He's the SEC commissioner. He's Greg Sankey back on the show. Commissioner, thanks for joining us. When did the SEC first start to focus its resources maybe on making the conference a basketball powerhouse? Was there, a moment where you said, why don't we just take the headlines in other months?
Well, yeah, I can speak to when it became really raw for me, and it was March of 2016. That was the end of my first basketball season as the SEC's commissioner, and we had three teams selected to the NCAA tournament on the men's side. Dan, that was the fourth time that had happened in the prior 10 years. So it's not like we had a great trend going, but when you're in the commissioner's chair, that moment was pretty raw. And we had to do some things differently from our end in the conference office.
Okay, but what was the plan that you put in place?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, we had some consulting relationships where we really weren't talking about the right things. You remember the old RPI, which is now the net? We would spend an inordinate amount of time trying to figure out how to game the RPI and scheduling. We weren't talking about hiring the right people. We weren't talking about facilities. We weren't talking about recruiting. The day after that selection Sunday, I transitioned away from one advisor and I brought Mike Tranghese in the next day. And what Mike did is help us talk about the right things. The other bonus with Tranghese, and I grew up outside Syracuse, New York, so watched the Big East form, was like when Mike said you're good at basketball to the media, you were automatically good at basketball. But one of the things he did was he talked to our ADs as they were going through the hiring of coaches and not tell them who to hire, but talk to them about perhaps who not to hire, who may not be ready for the stage that we have. Those kind of conversations became much more relevant. We had some other tweaks we needed to make, but that was a big part of the conversation.
Did you take the same approach to football at any point where you guys have been successful winning titles, but now with more teams in the playoffs, and is there a shift in philosophy?
The reality of this job, and a long time ago, I was Southland Conference Commissioner. I was like way off Broadway. You never called me for an interview, so I never had the opportunity. I made a decision that every day in that role, you had to think about football one way or another. And I think the reality of the Southeastern Conference is football is dominant on a daily basis. We have 21 other sports, but we also have to recognize the conversation allocation, the time allocation. So football's a bit more natural. Do we talk about issues? Absolutely. We're talking about scheduling in the conference. We talk about non-conference scheduling. We talk about CFP impacts. That's daily. We had to be a little bit more intentional on the basketball front 10 years ago.
Are you in favor of more teams qualifying for March Madness?
Yeah, I'm in favor of fully exploring that. I think there's advantages to doing so, given there's more Division I members. Right now, there's one less conference, but what we're doing is excluding from participation some of the top 50 teams. And I think when you look last year at North Carolina State, an 11 seed makes it to the Final Four. You've had two or three teams playing Dayton that have made it to the Final Four or made it into the Elite Eight and Sweet 16. What that tells me is there's a competitive balance at the high end, and we have to think about providing access. Now, I wouldn't just run to expand for the sake of expansion. I've never put a number on it. I think, and I've been clear, that it needs to be fully explored, and I'm pleased that the NCAA leadership and the committees involved are doing so.
Talking to Greg Sankey, SEC Commissioner, more concerned about transfer portal and NIL with college football or college basketball?
I think both are relevant. I watch the rhetoric right now, Dan, and I mean, we forget that we've just seen coaches transfer, right? We've seen head coaches leave a program last week to go to another program. I've had it in my league. I've had it in my league a year ago, where a coach leaves program A in the SEC to go to program B. That's reality. The commentary about young people doing the same thing needs to be in the context that the adults have that advantage. Now, there needs to be an orderly process. So when you watch coaches move, it's a pretty tight time frame. There are anomalies to that. And I think we need to tighten up the time frame. don't forget, like 3 or 4 years ago, the transfer portal was open 365 days a year. It's been narrowed. It's been moved back a week. Plenty of opining that we shouldn't have the transfer portal open during the NCAA tournament. I'll give you that. But I also know there's a lot of backroom conversations that take place. And at least right now, with the portal open, everything's on the table. If somebody's looking to leave, they go in the portal and it's known and people can deal with that. It makes it busy for 16 teams, and I'm empathetic there. But we ought to just think contextually about what happens big picture in the game.
But
The NIL front, we're going to see in a week and a half the outcome of a lawsuit settlement, and whether that provides meaningful oversight of third-party name, image, and likeness activity. It can be a much healthier environment.
what if we cap the number of transfer portal players that you can bring in? Or, I'm just trying to, everybody, says we have a problem. I just haven't heard solutions here of how can we make this better for all involved.
Yeah, we've talked about solutions. So I think you have to go back. There used to be an NCAA limit on the number of entering team members in a year or over 2 years. The basketball community really ended up railing against that. Miles Brand was the president when that came in. We could go right back to that and create some continuity. I do think you have to remember that we have had attorneys general in states file lawsuits over transfer policies, even common sense transfer policies. We also have to remember the NCAA has a habit of being asked for waivers and granting waivers, which I think magnifies the problem. So if we came to a point where he said, hey, the rules are the rules, here's the time frame you can engage in certain behavior, and there are no waivers and there are no lawsuits out of those waivers, that'd be idyllic for us compared to where we are now.
12 teams in the college football playoffs. When do we go to 14?
We'll see. Not this season. It's a topic of conversation. My view is it took us a heck of a long time to just get to 12. I think 12 was a success by all accounts. You saw continuing interest through the playoff. We actually took a deeper dive as a CFP management committee. So that's like gobbledygook for the commissioners and the Notre Dame AD, looking at an analysis of viewership throughout the playoff. A lot of positive stories. You would hear this like year over year comparison of a particular game being down. That didn't tell the full story. So I think it was the right time to expand. I think it worked well. I think we learned a lot. We've got some work to do before the 25 season to make some adjustments. I think the bracketing, where we had these seeds that got moved into the top four and people lost home games, I'd like to see that change. I think that's immediate. I do think there's some relevance to thinking about expanding the number, whether it stays at 12 or 14. I think even 16 is a relevant conversation in advance of the 26 season. That doesn't mean we just go there, but like that NCAA tournament expansion, we should be looking at what are the impacts and what are the opportunities.
Give me an alternative to these selection committees.
Well, we had the old BCS computer rankings. Remember those days? And everybody said, how can we have computers making these decisions? We need people. And what we have now is, how can we let people make these decisions? We need computers. So it's the full-on pendulum swing.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something in the middle where the combination of a committee and better informed data helps support decisions. What I do think's really important from a Southeastern Conference perspective is the number on the left-hand side of wins and losses the most important, or the right-hand side? And what happened last year, and maybe the last couple of years, causes, at least among my athletics directors, the question of, we need to lose fewer games. That creates thinking about non-conference scheduling that kind of dumbs it down. I don't think that's good for the game.
Yeah.
I don't think Nebraska canceling the Tennessee series is good for college football. And the citation was that members of the CFP selection committee said, well, it won't hurt you that much for dropping the game. I think that's problematic. I tend to think we should play 9 conference games, but to get there, we have to have more clarity on the CFP selection process. So in answer to your direct question, there's likely a balance that can be struck between the human thought process and the analytics. We know that people didn't like just analytics, and now they're trending towards we just don't like humanity as much as we thought we did. So where's the middle ground is another one of those work
Would
tasks.
you be in favor of a college football scheduling czar?
Some of these outside ideas have said that. I'd welcome a conference commissioner having more authority over just deciding conference and non-conference schedules. I don't think the culture of college football lends itself to czars. I've probably said to you, like the Russian czar thing didn't work out very well over time. And remember, like the 80s drug czar, and we still have problems. So I don't think just identifying that one mechanism solves the problems. I'd welcome if people said, hey, you go set my conference schedule, pick the number of games in this league and our non-conference opponents. I'd pursue that in a different way, but that's not something that resonates within a room of athletics directors and head football coaches quite the same way it does on a Zoom with you.
One other item, and this is off topic with football and basketball, but it does relate to it. Can you see where we separate college football, college basketball, and then you have these other sports that we don't want to lose? They're not revenue producing, but softball and lacrosse and soccer, and we make them regional. So they're not flying, Cal and Stanford aren't flying cross country for wrestling or volleyball. That we make this regional. So, your budget is not at stake here. And you can still keep these smaller, sports, Olympic sports maybe.
I don't know what kind of awards you give for genius decision making, but I think you just gave me a gold star because we are a regional conference. And for example, last
Well,
week,
you guys are.
Yeah.
Yeah, but college sports is not.
Well, that's because others made different decisions and they have to live with those decisions.
Yeah,
And
but
I'll
you're
give you
running college sports to me, so that's why I'm asking.
Okay.
That's I'm making you the college football, not czar. You're running college sports. Why don't we let these other sports, smaller sports, non-revenue producing, stay regional while football and basketball, if you want them going cross country, great.
Again, I'm gonna hold the Southeastern Conference up as the bright shining example of decision making, and here's a why. I actually think I'm not going to speak to everybody else. They made their decisions for different reasons. When I made those decisions, I think you can look at what we've done and say, no, they wouldn't have done the same thing. We had a packed stadium for LSU at Texas last week in baseball, packed. We had a packed stadium for Auburn at Texas in softball. I think those build on each other. I think those build on each other. So your question, kind of the foundation was take football and basketball. I think if you're going to do something in basketball, you're doing it for men's and women's basketball. We have to acknowledge that. And I'm going to have baseball programs, first round draft picks in baseball who say, wait a second, I play in front of more people for conference baseball games than my basketball team plays in front of. And I'm going to sign an 8-figure contract with a signing bonus that's enormous right up. Why don't I deserve the same treatment as my basketball colleagues, men or women? I think there are distinctions that can be made, but I think some of that has to play out in decision making. So for the Southeastern Conference, I think what we do in football has great meaning in what we do in basketball. And you saw it with our environments in basketball this past year. I think what we do in football and basketball plays out in baseball and softball in meaningful ways. I think people want to be in those environments. If you want to spend your time preparing, learning, and competing, not on airplanes, you're going to come and challenge yourself here at the highest level. That's my recruiting pitch. Others may have to make different decisions because I think you've seen with these coast to coast conferences, people opine about, hey, maybe we need a central hub for competition so we're not flying all over the place. I think they're probably all learning from this first year as they go. But I really like the way we've configured ourselves because it meets the exact question that you've asked me on a sport by sport basis.
He's the former great commissioner from the Southland Conference. He's Greg Sankey. Great to talk to you again. Enjoy the rest of the tournament. Good to visit with you again.
I certainly hope I do.
Thank you, Greg.